And I'm immediately backpedaling. I don't know where all these rivers are. And there's all different chemicals in them. And this is going to take all different kinds of frequencies because I was doing sonic research. In sonic research, if you've got a sine wave here, how do you cancel that out? You strengthen and identify. This is a homeopathic technique. You have a sine wave. This bee stung you. You got apis in your body now, but you actually attracted in that apis because the bee's trying to help you balance your body out. So now you got apis. How do you take it out of your body homeopathically? You go in above, typically with a 6x if it's a fresh sting, and below, typically with a 6x or below. Actually, you want to stay above 6x, typically between a 12x and a 6x, and you strengthen and you identify that waveform. Then you phase shift with something like a C or an M, this is homeopathically, and you go back over it. What have you done? You've canceled that waveform out of the body. So pay attention when you get a bee sting or a wasp sting, because they're trying to help you. You may think I just stepped on their nest. Well, maybe, but maybe when you stepped on their nest, they realized that you needed that frequency in order to heal something in you. So sound and all of the frequencies all around us, we're all interconnected. We're interconnected with sound, and how spirit communicates with you is through sound. So anyway, long story short, I figured out the mathematical patterning. It took me 14 months working 10, 12, 14 hours a day to crack the coding, but I figured out the patterning, and my guides kept telling me exactly how to do it. It took a combination of radionics and dowsing and just a lot of recording engineering sessions, but I finally got it right. And when we got it right, we were actually getting results with water sonication. So water sonication is cleaning water with low-level sound. And those recordings were done in 2003. And we had a group of people out of California that were very interested. And in 2007, I became a visiting professor at Globe Institute. I specialize in the connection between sound, nutrition, and health. It doesn't mean I teach a lot. It means the classes start at 9 o'clock Indiana time. I'm a night owl. And I'm not going to answer 25 students' questions who live in all different countries and all different time zones all over the year. If they can stay with me, I've stayed up till 9:30 in the morning to answer questions. I can tell you any special ed teacher, I had 6 ADHD, ADD, or post-head trauma students in one class. I still have 3 more final consults to do with them. Any special ed teacher needs to have a double in their salary, at least a double. But the connection between sound, nutrition, and health, I didn't catch that at first. What happened was other people who were sonic researchers, they're seeing what sound looks like, because in order to get the phasing correct, we started studying how sound looked on an oscilloscope. And an oscilloscope is basically an electronics device that shows you the waveform. It's showing you the electrical waveform. So how many of you have seen cymatics? Have any of you seen cymatics? Okay, you know what cymatics is. So cymatics is a speaker under a plate or a Coke bowl or a cup, and the frequency basically affects the waveform. So when you look in your church windows, when you look at your mandalas, when you look at your glyphs, our crop circles that are showing up everywhere, this is actually created with sound. So when you speak something out, you are creating a sound field around your body. And that sound field around your body, basically, it's kind of like an egg, is the sound field around your body. So my sonic research, fast forward to 2012, and in 2007, I had two doctors in the audience, and another visiting professor, Shira Hart, which many of you met, and Dr. Jimmy Pennington out of Texas, and no, Shira Hart and Randy Masters and I gave a lecture, and we were lecturing on 18 fundamental frequencies. That was what was on the meditation room wall, which is my sonic algorithm. So people want to know, what are these Lissajous figures? The Lissajous figures are what you see on the oscilloscope. So they wanted to know what that was. Well, there's 1,000 people, and we weren't on the schedule, and so we just passed out flyers, and we commandeered the hotel lobby. And yes, the fire marshal did show up to shut us down, but he was gracious and let us continue. There were two doctors that were researching 26 frequencies, and we were lecturing on 18 of them. And they learned more in 1 hour than they had learned in 15 years. They led us into the next 8 frequencies, and they also led us into looking at how this was tied into the I Ching, the Lo Shu, and the Tai Chuan Ching. So the sonic research that was downloaded to us is actually a 65, the thing bit me. It's like a 6,500-year-old number set that has to do with controlling the flow of energy. So in 2008, gentleman, his name's Ray Harvey Houston, wonderful gentleman. He was the original hydraulics engineer for Tennessee Valley Authority. He was very interested in certain waveforms and how certain waveforms can manipulate and move objects. That was kind of a side project of his. He was in his 80s, and what he did is he funded a boat for us from 2008 until about 2 years ago in San Francisco Bay, and we put those sound codes in San Francisco Bay from 2008 until about 2 years ago. He told me after he passed that the foundation would not be able to keep the boat going, but I had a free place to stay. Everybody thought I had moved to California because I was out there 2007, 4 months. I was out there 8 months, 2008. But you know, you got to really twist my arm to get me to go float on a boat, you know. Anyway, when I was driving out there in 2014, let me back up. In 2012, Dr. Pennington, he's a doctor of Oriental medicine, but he uses tuning forks. You can use a tuning fork just like you use an acupuncture needle or the little magnetic balls or the moxibustion. You can use a tuning fork, and you can impact the body just like acupuncture does without penetrating the skin. And that was one of the things that Dr. Pennington and I had in common, because we both did that. So 2012, I'm in Texas. I'm getting ready to leave the next morning. Shira Hart calls me, and she says, "Where are you?" I was supposed to be in a research project with Andrew Collier, and he had a family emergency and had to leave. And I said, "I'm in Houston." She said, "I'll fly to Houston." And I said, "Don't fly to Houston." I said, "I'm leaving tomorrow morning." And she goes, "Well, do you want me to fly to Fort Wayne?" I said, "No, fly to Grand Rapids. There's going to be an event at Mary and Dean Hardy's place." And I said, "I'll share my lecture spot, the booth, and you've got a free place to sleep." And she goes, "Okay, you've got a deal." So many of you met Shira Hart that weekend, and she was another one of the visiting professors at Globe Institute. So that was how you all came to meet Shira, but it actually started back in 2000. Because she was taking our frequency patterns and she was putting them at Stonehenge and other sacred spots all around the world. So, she said, "Have you seen Dr. Pennington?" I said, "Oh, that name's familiar. I'm not really good with names." And she goes, "He was one of the two doctors in 2007 at Globe." I said, "The tall, thin one with the dark hair?" And she said, "Yes." And she said, "Call him." I said, "You know I'm not organized. Send me the number." "Do you have the number?" She's very organized. She sent me the number. She says, "Promise me you'll call him right now. Right now. Right now." I hung up. She hung up the phone. I called. He answered the phone. He said, "Where are you?" I said, "Channelview." He says, "Good. My last patient's walking in the door. Head down here. This is the address. Let's open book it." And we open booked it. Oh my goodness. One of my goals is to get these people who are inventor people all together. This is one of Mary's goals. get them together and get them communicating. I want to lock them all in a room, feed them nothing but sun formula and organic food and good clean water, and come up with some solutions. You can't leave. You're going to have to come up with the solutions because we're in a mess. We're in a mess. So anyway, he had started working with University of Houston basketball players who were getting bonked in the head, developing ADD, and flunking out of their scholarships. We're getting results cleaning algae in water. We're getting rid of brown and green algae, but unidentified species. We've gotten the attention of Dr. Wes Marin back in 2003, who's a water scientist, but he's also a naturalist. And his specialty of research was actually he studied the baleen and the humpback whales. And the baleen and the humpback whales, they swim to the surface and they swim around like they're listening. And then they dive to the ocean floor. They swim around like they're listening. And they do this over and over and over and over. And then they swim to this even temperature gradient of water that's close to the ocean floor. And they tone throughout this. What he believes they're doing is the difference tone and the summation tones between what they hear at the surface and what they hear at the ocean floor. And then they put that into the SOFAR channel. What is the SOFAR channel? It's this even temperature gradient of water that runs close to the ocean floor that historically the whales have used to tone through to communicate. Sound travels further and faster in this channel. Well, we now use it for sonar. What he believes is, and the reason he got interested in my research, he believes that teaching this to dolphins and whales and marine life, he believes that the boating and the pollution and the sonar has disrupted these whales' natural ability to do what their job is, which is to actually sing through this channel, and that massages the tectonic plates, which keeps us from having earthquakes. So I don't know if there's anybody here. Lori has done it. We were trying to learn the patterning to do ceremony with these frequencies. And so 15 of us purchased these 18 tuning forks. And so we're trying to get our timing and our rhythm, and nobody except Tom was a musician. And so we're trying to learn our timing and our rhythm. Within 2 weeks' time, all of the cranial plates on our heads shifted. So I'm lecturing about this at Universal Light Expo, and this tall guy stands up. He introduces himself as a medical doctor who specializes in craniosacral. And he says, "You're telling me you're doing natural tree panning?" And I'm like, "Well, you're going to have to enlighten everybody in the audience what is tree panning." And so he explained that when the brain swells, you drill a hole in the head in order to ease the pressure. But there are actually many indigenous tribes that they actually mutilated babies at birth to keep these cranial plates open. When a baby's born, you know they have a soft spot, and then over time that closes over. Well, I can tell you that when we started working within 2 weeks of just holding the tuning forks, your bones are a resonator all throughout your body. I'm holding these tuning forks trying to get this patterning going, and my whole head, I got holes all over my head. That's going to open you up because you don't have the constriction. Your cranial plates are supposed to breathe when you breathe. They're supposed to move when you move. I rarely get a headache. I have to have a really bad histamine reaction to have a headache anymore, but I used to have headaches all the time. And so he came to the booth the next day, and he said, "Lady, I didn't want to say you were a liar, but I don't believe you. And I'm not going to believe you unless you let me examine your head." Guy's about 6'5". I just turned around and said, "There you go." And he's like, "Oh my goodness." He says, "You've got holes where holes don't exist. You've got openings where there aren't typical plates." He says, "Do you know anybody else that has this?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, there's Lori Boyd. Lori Boyd's coming down that aisle." I said, "She's got it too." And so Lori gets there, And we introduced him, and he said, he explains what he does for a living, and he says, "Can I examine your head?" She goes, "Oh yeah, I'm a massage therapist. I'd really appreciate this." So she's like, "You've got days to continue to do this." And so he's like, "You live together, right?" "No, we're about an hour and a half apart." He's like, I said, "But we were working with the same frequencies with tuning forks." And he's like, I need to see somebody else. Lori said, "Hey, Cheryl Lakin's here. She'll be here in a minute. She's supposed to be working the booth, but she's out shopping at the booth." And so she shows up, and he examines her head. And she's got same openings in the same places. Now, there's 15 of us who have this. And this guy goes, "This is going to set medicine on its ear." He said, "Does anybody have a CT scan or an MRI before you started working with tuning forks?" Lori said, "No." Cyril said, "No." I said, "I have one of each." He goes, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I don't know where it is, but I have them. I actually got the screens because they were closing the facility, and I knew it would be important to keep them." And he says, "Won't do any good." He says, if I do this, he says, "I'll lose my job." I said, "Tell you what, how about I go to another doctor and I get them to order an MRI. I'm not doing a CT. I'll order an MRI." And I said, "And then I'll come to you for a second opinion." He goes, "Oh, lady, you are flat dangerous." I said, "I'm here on a mission." When those glyphs appeared the second time, the first one was in sand. I was, so this is back to 93. I was furious. I worked with a bunch of jokesters, and we were always pranking each other. And so I thought they had gotten some board or something and had made this pattern in the first time it was in sand. And I was mad, and nobody would admit to doing it. And I lived alone. I had 2 dogs. My dogs didn't bark. We shared who did the breakfast every day. It went to somebody else's house. I had this deaf and blind dog, and once they met you, they wouldn't bark at you anymore. If you were let in, you were okay. So my dogs didn't bark when the pattern went down in the sand. So fast forward about 6 months later, hear the same frequencies again. The dogs don't budge. I'm sleeping in sweats at that time because I've got both hands in bilateral cast from a wreck I was in. And I've got on sweats because I can't zip a zipper. I can't button a button because I don't have my fingers to use. And I put on a corduroy bathrobe, and I've got on cotton slippers, and I'm pulled out to the backyard like a magnet again. It's bright as day, and here's that same pattern, but it's in snow that's mid-thigh high and light and fluffy. Not typical snow for Indiana. We kind of get thick, heavy, wet snow because we have 1 river underground and then 3 rivers in Fort Wayne. And so I'm like, wow, this is the same pattern, and there's no foot traffic through here. There's nothing except this pattern. Looks like somebody took a blowtorch in the snow. And so my hands were healing from surgery, and I still was in immobilization braces, but I could work a shovel a little bit, but I couldn't work a shovel very far. So I had gotten the shovel out of the garage, and I started trying to dig it, and I couldn't dig very far, so I just started jumping. I was much more physically fit than I am now. I'm jumping into the snow, and then I landed in the path, and I'm like, this is the same pattern. This is the same pattern. And so I started walking the pattern, and the pattern looped into itself. You all are familiar with the flower of life and the seed of life. That was the pattern. So I'm walking in these circles all night long, and after I walked it 3 times clockwise, it didn't feel right. And so I turned around and I walked counterclockwise. I walked counterclockwise until the sun was coming up. And I'm like, oh, the sun's coming up. This is so bizarre. I'm wet all the way up to my waist from the corduroy bathrobe sweeping the sides of the pattern. And I said, my neighbor's going to look out here, and they're going to see me walking around in circles in all this snow, and they're going to call the paddy wagons and the white jackets on me. I don't want to mess up the pattern. I want to study this pattern. But I want the shortest route back because I'm actually tired. And this is so weird. I've been freezing my butt off since I moved up here from Texas, and I'm not cold. I wasn't cold. And so I turned around, and it was shorter to go back clockwise. So I started out going clockwise, and then I went counterclockwise a lot, and then I came back forward clockwise, and I exited out. What was it? It was the east door. I didn't know even which way was east at that time, at that property, but it was the east door. So I went in and out of the east door. I actually did a Native American technique where you do healing and you go back in time. So you go to your point, you enter through the east door, you go to the circle, you go into the circle, you walk in clockwise, and then you walk to the point of where the injury, the illness, the insult, whatever happened, and then you turn and you go counterclockwise back in time. Well, I went way back in time in 94. I went way back in time in the circle. And then I came back clockwise, and when I didn't want to mess up the circle, but I had to jump back into those same holes to get back to the porch. And so I jumped back in, and then when I got to where I had dug with a shovel, I did just a big oomph jump, and I landed both feet on the path. I went almost all the way to the ground with the jump because it took a lot of oomph to get out of mid-thigh high snow. And when I hit that ground, I had one clear thought that came to me and through me. The medical path doesn't work. I've got to take back my power. We all have to take back our power. I was told, clean up the rivers of the world. It's not just the physical rivers of the world, although that's part of it. It's the rivers of life that run within us, which is our blood and our lymph. And it's the rivers of love that are to flow through us. Somewhat of a metaphor. They have to spell it out for me. They don't spell it out for me sometimes. I'm getting better, but they need to spell it out. So what I was told, so now fast forward to Patricia and Wendy and I getting all these numbers. What I had been told about 3 or 4 days before they showed up was that I said, it's going to take a lot of different frequencies. I don't even know what frequencies to use for West Nile virus because that was a research project that I was working on. And what we had discovered is that the equine West Nile virus, but it was actually a manufactured form, had been aerosol sprayed throughout the United States. This was actually announced at a health, people who were health food inspectors, and it was a huge conference. It was health food inspectors, and it was people who they're the forest rangers. And it was announced that West Nile virus had been aerosol sprayed throughout the United States, and they didn't know how to handle it or what to do with it, and they weren't telling anyone because they were afraid of mass panic. And the health food inspector who happened to be there happened to be one of my clients. He would never again meet me except in a public place. Freaked him out really badly because I had already figured out that West Nile virus was in the water. We sampled and sampled and sampled. I had a mother and a granddaughter, and they went out and we got water from wells. We got water from different towns. We got bottled water. We started testing. And then they would come over on Sunday, and we would work all day long testing radionically to see what we were finding. And the granddaughter was about 11. And so I was getting supplements and reagents to test and test and test. And it didn't matter. There were 8 frequencies, and it didn't matter which one you use, which supplement you use, it would spike. Something else would spike. It wasn't the equine West Nile virus. It was a different type. And so I'm like, I give up. I said, we've been testing for months. And I said, I've tested everything here. I've borrowed everything from everybody who's an alternative practitioner around. I've got a reagent set that doesn't quit, but oh my goodness, I just can't figure this out. And the 11-year-old granddaughter said, you haven't tested everything, Judy. And the grandmother goes, don't be disrespectful to Judy. And And she says, I'm not being disrespectful. You haven't tested everything in the room. And I said, what haven't I tested? I said, she's right. Must be something else in here that I haven't tested. What haven't I tested? She said, you haven't tested these tuning forks yet. What? You haven't tested these tuning forks yet. I hadn't tested the sound. We started testing tuning forks, and we did that for several more weeks. I'm trying to think of his name. It'll come to me in just a second. Jonathan Goldman, one of the early sound healers. He has a brother who's on the other side. His brother channeled 2 frequencies to him, which told him he needed to use in his sound healing practice. He and his wife had gifted me a set of those 2 tuning forks. Those 2 tuning forks were phi ratio. Those 2 tuning forks dropped that rate. And then we started testing the others, and we found a combination, but nobody could afford that big of a set of tuning forks, and so we did a set of 4 tuning forks. And the other 2 frequencies were part of those 55 downloaded numbers to us. So I'd have to look on the tuning forks to tell you, but one of the tuning forks, not Jonathan Goldman's, it was in the 200 range and the 400 range, but there's another one that's in the 400 range, and it's 444. So here's your 13 coming up. If you take 444 and you divide by how sound travels, which is spiral pi, what you get is the structure constant of hydrogen, and that's one of the secrets of my sonic algorithm for water sonication. So when you look at how sound travels through the bony plates or into your ears or through your body, it depends on how thick that structure is, or that glob of organ that you've got, or the fluid that's in that organ. It depends on the penetration and the sound rate. But when you use the headphones here, when Dr. Pennington did the EEG studies, he wanted people who did not have ADD before they had head trauma. So the population he chose, they had severe ADD post-closed head trauma, but did not have it before. So they had adult acquired head trauma, because that was the population he was working with the basketball players. I told him I needed a 22 to a 26-foot room. We had an 11-foot room. So you couldn't see the image, because the image is, I had a laser created that's called the KISS laser, which is a joke on me because I don't know how to keep anything short and simple. But it actually stands for a coin term by my audio engineer, chimotropic, which means turning wave, chimotropic imaging sound system. I'm paying this guy $60 an hour. I wanted to be able to blow up this image instead of looking at a 2-inch by a 2-inch screen, for which I'm paying a fortune to study it. I need to get it as big as a wall. So this thing keeps grabbing me. There's a splinter here. And so literally what happened was the first engineer who did it, I finally got to the engineer who was the largest importer. He was a laser design engineer. He was an electronics design engineer. He was an audio engineer, and he was the largest importer of lasers and laser components in the United States. And he taught laser engineering at the college level. And so I told him what I needed. And he goes, I think I get what you need. He said, can you send me some of what you're working on? So we already had that. So as soon as he got that, oh man, this guy's mind was just going. He says, I've got your design. And so as I made money, I just sent him money. And then when I get enough, I'd get a laser. But unfortunately, he went to the grave with the designs in his head. And he was one of the few people who actually did things like designed lasers for medical equipment. And so the KISS laser is that's a major component. So what happened is when Dr. Pennington did the testing on this, every person we tested who had acquired post-closed head trauma ADD on EEG, 3-line lead with the ground EEG, ADD, true ADD is high theta, high alpha, virtually no beta brain waves. If there's any beta brain waves, it's very high frequency beta brain waves, which is very stressful. They can't focus if their life depends on it. So how many teachers are dictating to parents to put their kids on something like Adderall or Strattera? I'm sorry, school system, if you're going to demand that you put my child on a psychotropic drug, I want you to pay for this EEG study that proves that they actually have ADD. Don't feed them GMO food for their free breakfast and free lunch. Feed them something that's nutritious and is going to feed and nourish them. So the frequency that goes missing, that appears to go missing in the human voice print analysis, is 111 hertz. This was discovered by a woman who did voice print analysis, and over a 3-year period of time, she lived in about 8 different states, from Northeast to Southeast to Central to the Rockies to, and she came up to me at a lecture and she said, "You're the only person speaking frequency specific." And I said, "That's because I usually kill people who lecture frequency specific." They usually kill people who lecture frequency specific. Look at, or they discredit them. Look at Royal Raymond Reich as one. So when you go to sound healing conferences, they talk about A or B or C sharp or G flat or something like that. And so I lecture, though, very frequency specific. So anyway, she said, "I've noticed this patterning." And she says, "Everybody's missing this frequency. It doesn't matter where they are." I said, "Oh, that's only tied to food." And that was where we locked in on it, and come to find out that note is an octave of every 8-note chord in 15 sonic algorithms of 324 8-note chords per algorithm, and it's the major difference tone. And that's what we were told to put back into the water. And it changes the human brainwave state. We take people out of ADD. What we're doing is visual phototransduction. It appears, I'm not a physicist, I'm not a medical doctor, but it appears what we're doing is visual phototransduction, which creates chemical messengering in the brain. And we take people out of ADD, post-closed head trauma, and sometime between the 29 and 31-minute mark with that particular sequelae of closed head trauma, and we put them into a brainwave state that looks like this, kind of like a picket fence, and that's the brainwave state of mu, which is brainwave synchronicity across the motor cortex, 13.7 hertz. So you've got a question? I can't make that statement on a recorded line. If somebody wants to turn off the camera, I will. So, but 111 hertz was, I will say this online because this is true and proven. 111 hertz was proven in medical Germany. Back in the mid-30s, Dr. Sir Peter Guy Manners was one of the interns working on this research project, and they discovered that 111 hertz, just delivered to the human body, would stimulate endorphin production. Endorphin production requires phenylalanine on a chemical level. What is she seeing that's missing? People are missing phenylalanine. How are we missing phenylalanine? Well, there's a particular herbicide that locks up manganese in the soil. Without manganese, you lock up the aromatic amino acids, of which phenylalanine is one of them. So you can see the logic behind the algorithms, but we were guided to do this long before we ever found the answers as to why we were doing this. So a product that I've marketed for 21 years, I'm one of 2 distributors worldwide who doesn't have a formal medical degree. that is how I funded the research, is through the sale of Sun Formula. And Sun Formula is now a Class 1 medical food, and phenylalanine is one of the ingredients. And because I had had voice print analysis 2 years before, a year before, and 6 months before, when I got on Sun Formula, because my first purchase was a pallet, I went whole hog with it, dropped everything else that I was taking. And 6 months after I got on it, I did a voice print analysis. A year later, at the year later mark, I did a voice print analysis. And at the 2-year mark, I did a voice print analysis. Frequencies were coming back into my voice, but one frequency was spiking. What was that one frequency? 111 hertz. So that's the beginning. I have some things for you all. If I have them at the table. This is now a Class 1 medical food. We're still trying to figure out how to maybe get insurance to pay for it. But the product has 45 peer-reviewed and published medical studies now with never a single adverse reaction in over 57 years of use. But I can tell you, on me, it put 111 hertz back into my frequency range that you test with different types of equipment. And it does it to other people, and it's a component piece of the brain training program. But if you think about it, your brain is 85 to 95% water, and it was created to clean water with sound, was the original intent. So I thank you all, and there's more.